It's a beautiful day. The sun shines from a steep angle and the air is hot. Something in this hurried summer reminds me of the childhood. But it's too hot and too early, and there are fewer butterflies and bees. My mind does not fully comprehend this disparity, and it takes a few steps back into the cool bluish shadows of my cranium. There is something dreamlike about the day, lit in a strong warm light, or something like a movie or a memory. It is both pleasant and alarming at the same time, like the end of the world should be, if it's a good one. 1 year ago I was blind. In a park behind the building I saw just grass and a few trees. That's what parks look like here. In some corners of the globe, parks are more closely related to gardens, but here they are built for picnics and sunbathing. The summer is or used to be short. Every possible chance to catch a melanoma with a devitaminizing pretext has to be grabbed. But my blindness was not caused by the sun or the snow, just simple ignorance. I learned at school to recognize a bird, but never could really tell which species in the family, though it was in the curriculum. I recognized the general features of a pine or a spruce. But what even is a fir then? I knew the difference between a hare and a rabbit, but I could never really tell which is the mountain hare and which is the European hare. And what about all the smaller beings? Grasses, insects, slugs, lichens, mosses, leading a more modest life? Some I could categorize roughly, but most of them would be completely invisible to me. How did this happen? When I was a kid, I was in love with the nature. I was brought up on a small farm. I spent a lot of time in the forests, adventuring along the little rivers, climbing rocks, eating ants, and whenever possible at the sea. My dream was to live the summers in the forest or an island like Robinson Crusoe, under a roof that I would have built myself. To know and live in harmony with the nature. I even dissected the drowned rat with a rusty knife to learn about it. How did I forget all that? Well, it turns out that it's incredibly easy to forget things that don't impress the people around you. But life can sometimes serve you surprise reminders. Whatever you leave behind you will find in front of you. While traveling in Iceland last year, suddenly something extraordinary happened that made me rethink my life. We live in an apartment building in suburbia, complete with a little dying shopping centers, train tracks, evenings with speeding young rebels in noisy unwashed cars that weren't new even when I was young, pigeons and bars that served unspeakable food but relatively cool beer. There are also parks, rivers, fields, forests. Lots of birds and some mammals that I don't want to name lest I tempt someone hungry to defy the general hunting prohibition in the populated areas. When I passed the carpet washing place behind our building and the dog park and stepped from the open grass field into the little forest, the temperature drops pleasantly. Eyes take a few moments to adjust after the direct scorch from the sky. This is not the wild forest, it's more like a park. But it also serves to unfold a nature reserve around the swamp and the little river that originates there. It is established to protect this rich biotope. On the other side of the reserve there's a meadow. The area provides home to a large number of different species, birds being the most visible and audible of the animal ones. I know that I look funny to most of the people, walking there with all my equipment. The spontaneous smiles that the oncoming dog walkers give me make it clear. They also try to hide their curiosity of my doings. At this age, I'm simply happy to entertain. A butterfly net with a telescopic arm is sticking out from my backpack. Occasionally the kill jars, meant for a quick and painless end for the insects that collect, clink there against some gardening tools that I use when picking up plants for my herbarium. I have forceps of different sizes and materials, from tiny ones used in electronics to really big ones meant for barbecue. There are gloves and bags, centrifuge tubes of different sizes, a measurement stick, hand lenses that make it possible to see tiny details for identification, and lots more. But importantly, there are binoculars hanging from my neck. This silly look can work into my advantage. It's like a membership card to a secret society. Just carrying these binoculars makes bird watchers and nature enthusiasts talk to me, and there are surprisingly many of them. First comes the common opening phrase.
Seeing anything?
The protocol dictates, then, that I shall downplay the sightings, but can drop the name of a bird that I saw recently in the area, and to keep things civilized, preferably one that is uncommon but not rare. I will receive similar information from the other party. At this point, I get the opportunity to tell that I'm in fact a complete beginner, but learning slowly. Useful tips follow. I'm honestly thankful for this training. It's like a crowdsourced apprenticeship for us journeymen. But back to the woods. Here in the little urban oasis, the sentinels of the forest watch us. They are called common blackbirds, and they are indeed common. But I would not have seen or even heard them a year ago. Now I see blackbirds everywhere. They are both bold and abundant. I call them sentinels because they give me a watchful appearance. They never seem to hide. Instead, they come to size up the trespasser, while the more timid creatures want to keep themselves still and strictly out of sight. My objective here is simple. I want to learn to see and hear. Seeing rarities can be fun, but observing the abundant common things that are all around us trains the eye. Those common blackbirds are so familiar at this point that it doesn't take more than half a second to identify one. The secret is that I know enough details to make a pretty positive identification, and that my eye has got enough training to catch those details quickly. Also, I've learned to tell apart a white-tailed deer from a roe deer, and an European hare from a mountain hare. Something that I struggled for years and years, but finally learned by just watching them with my binoculars for as long as I could. You wouldn't imagine that simply watching an animal you've seen 1,000 times for an hour would teach you anything, but you'd be wrong. Simply observing for a prolonged period, staring at the obvious, will slowly make the surface peel to reveal layers and layers of detail. The magical thing is that without giving the time, without taking the boring task of just looking and looking, you will never see those details. Details are timid and will only come to those who are patient enough to tame them. We always seem to have such a short supply of time and don't want to waste it. But you can't save time. There's no account that you can deposit the saved time for later to withdraw it when you're really enjoying yourself. Still, in the futile attempt to do so, we speed past life so fast we can only see blurry blobs busting by, and the destination unmoving and static in the horizon. Even on a bicycle, your senses are tied up. But walking, a whole new world opens up to you. The phenomenon of how learning changes your perception is familiar to me. I studied music from a very young age. First, I was supposed to become a violinist, but thank heavens that didn't happen, and I still have a good hearing in both of my ears. I took on the piano, and when I entered the local music school, the mandatory lessons in music theory ensued. This is not something that kids often enjoy much. I wasn't bad at it, but I failed to see the big picture for a long time. Then someday in some year after completing my musical theatre degree, I realized how little untrained ears hear. With the musician's ear, you hear into the music, through the music. You hear the individual strand that the piece of music is weaved of. It's like getting the first prescription glasses that make the world sharper and full of detail. That changes how you listen to music permanently. It will definitely spoil a lot of so-called music for you. But I have yet to meet a person who would seriously like to go back. Music theory is about structure on all levels. It doesn't only make the small things stand out, but it makes one appreciate the whole as well. It is about giving names to sounds and their qualities, combinations and progressions, but also structure, anatomy, if you will. Like the young me dissecting the poor rat on my Spartan slab, musicians take apart their subject of study in order to understand not only that it can bite you, but how it does that. So I know what I'm after here. What I need now is more of the legwork. Observing, identifying, reading, listening, learning. I will build a library of facts and organize them so that those facts start to make sense. I will learn and hone practical skills until my eyes, hands, heart, and legs do what I wish them to do. Nowadays, many people think that since we have an instant access to all the information we need in our pockets as long as the battery doesn't die on us, we don't need to learn the details anymore. But in order to understand how something works, you need to know more than just the surface. You need supporting knowledge to understand and not just to remember. That's a neat paradox. We need to memorize details to understand, and when we understand, we no longer need to remember them. Unless, of course, you want to go on learning also after the school. As an example, if you don't memorize the Cyrillic alphabet, you can't read words made out of them. If you don't memorize the Italian and French words on top of the lines of sheet music, they will mean nothing to you. Good luck looking them up while playing a concerto or trying to learn Russian. Once you've finished reading The Crime and Punishment or playing Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto No. 1, you can forget about those little facts. Unless, of course, you have appetite for more. I'm a trained actor, a musician, and also have a career in software development. What happened that made me want to leave behind these professions? I said earlier that something sudden and unexpected happened, but it's not the whole truth. What happened was the final trigger that set things into motion. The change was catalyzed by the previous years, and the activation energy was already low. After that, it took just a gentle 40-ton nudge from a creature of Lovecraftian proportions. Two of the major contributing factors were personal and one external. First of all, there is the matter of physical health. Sitting at the computer all day long on my posterior harms me immensely. I have now for years gained weight, my blood pressure has gone through the roof, and back and shoulder pains that were never present when I worked as a dancer have come back to haunt me. To be fair, dancers have all kinds of pains and injuries all the time, but rarely the ones from sitting too much. Then there is the mental health. Arts can be rewarding, but honestly, often crushing. Somehow the natural artistic tendency of our kind has evolved from something that is human to a competitive sport with a poor funding. There's a persistent myth that in order to be an artist you must suffer. This is as true as saying that in order to be a plumber you must be constipated. Many artists have suffered and made art despite their suffering, but here's a strong survivorship bias. We only pay attention to those suffering artists who make it and won't remember those who failed. We often even don't call them artists because that's reserved for those who have success. A textbook example of one who made it only after his life had ended is of course Vincent van Gogh. But really, most artists are generally healthy stock, and artists who beat their demons make better art, at least if they heal from their addiction to suffering. Remember to be kind with your criticism towards your aspiring artist friends. They need that kindness much more than Madonna or Kincaid. So to fight the health issues, I've been returning to the nature. Being in a place where there's more life and less killing, more chaos and less clockwork mechanics, that heals my mind. Going uphill, downhill, climbing over falling trees or crouching under them, that heals my body. The final thing has been becoming an adult and realizing that we have been betrayed. I went to school in 1989, and at that time there was a strong awareness of environmental problems. We learned about the greenhouse effect, holes in the ozone layer, and the importance of recycling. It was also implied that there are solutions, as there are, and that people work relentlessly to solve these problems. We kids don't need to worry. The adults will fix it. But our parents, uncles, aunts, and their friends did not solve the problem. Now I'm an adult, a real adult in my 40s, and we are becoming the ruling generation. It is people of my age who refuse to act and are in fact actively fighting against policies that would help. The world is burning, and my friends are fueling the flames. The world is burning. And finally, there's what happened in Iceland. Our little family fulfilled a long-time dream when we packed our suitcases and flew to the land of ice and fire. Strictly speaking, instead of suitcases, I packed a backpack with everything you'd expect to need on a day trip. I wanted to be ready to hike and prepare meals on the road. We were supposed to see Björk's cornucopia concert, but that was cancelled due to logistical reasons they never disclosed. We got refunded and she threw a DJ gig as an apology. We also visited the famous Blue Lagoon, which now is kept closed according to the eruptions of the nearby volcano. It had been dormant for 2,000 years and I would really have liked to see the eruption, but we were there a few months too early. We had booked a whale watching trip for our 5th day. The sea was rough and the trip was rescheduled to a later hour. Did I mention that I love the sea? I'm also relatively resistant to seasickness, but it turned out that my husband is not. And he was not the only one, despite the meds they gave us, which I decided to save for another, more dire situation. People were throwing up like pale green wobbly fire hydrants. The regurgitation did not bother me much. I was much more annoyed by a fellow countryman behind me. He had a carrying baritone and used it to explain to his wife and daughter, and by extension to us all, everything he saw. He clearly didn't deposit a lot of trust on his family members' ability of cognition, but also in his hubris failed to take into account that some of the public could possibly speak his language. He was dismissive about the captain's abilities, the vessel's seaworthiness, the ordinariness of the sunset, the lameness of the seabirds, the fascination that we peasants exhibited, and kept complaining why it is so difficult to hear what the guiding biologist had to say. Well, I knew the answer to the last one, so I turned around and told him politely to keep his mouth shut. This did not have a lasting effect, but I got the chance to catch the biologist's words as long as the silence lasted. She helped to look into the right direction and told us about the local marine life, and especially the whales. When the shores had become but distant lines in the horizon, we started seeing more sprays and tails of the whales. Then suddenly a humpback whale jumped from the depths of the Atlantic high up in the air and arched back to the sea right in front of the bow. Even the biologist was enthralled and told us how rare this kind of an encounter is. She explained that it is unknown why the whales sometimes behave like this. Maybe they are curious. Perhaps they want to fend off the intruders, or at least warn them not to come closer. They also might just be in a great mood and want to show it to the world. That was my favorite explanation. At that moment, I felt deeply happy, and for a moment even forgot about my desperately sick, suffering husband below the deck. All the little things that had been starting to bother me during the last few years became vivid images in my mind. They floated to their own places like hot air balloon puzzle pieces and formed pictures of the life past, the life present, and the life yet to come. I saw myself as a kid, exploring the living world using the microscope I got as a Christmas present, separating livers from hearts with my trusty but rusty knife, and observing the surroundings with the binoculars my grandparents gave me. Then I saw myself sitting on my ever-widening gluteus, conjuring up software programs in a process that is intellectually stimulating but rarely deeply meaningful. Finally, I saw myself as a conservation biologist, doing research as well as protective and restorative work in the field. I saw myself writing, podcasting, maybe making videos or films to share the concerns and the solutions with as many people as possible. A life dedicated to understanding and protecting this precious biosphere that we inhabit. I wanted to shout to the whale, "I'm your friend! I'm on your side!" But the whale had gone. I don't expect the nature to love me back. In fact, I'm sure it is either oblivious or partial to eating me. But not only does the biosphere provide me endless adventures and more mysteries than any person could ever imagine to solve, I am literally part of the biosphere, and so are you. Our generation has been tricked and betrayed. We have been lulled into a false sense of abstract continuity that has made it difficult to see what is happening. We have failed to act, and that's our own fault. The time to pay for our gullibility and lethargy is now. The road will be rocky, so sit tight. Our regrets will not reverse the death we brought to this world. It will not restore the climate. But we can still act. We need to fight, not only for ourselves and for our children, but because it is the only decent thing to do. We are human, and we must start earning that title. We have been blind, and now we must learn to see. This concludes the prologue to my show, Biosphere One Quest at a Time. In the following episodes, I'll embark on a mission to get where I want. There will be a lot of learning, seeking advice, and surprises along the way. If you wish to get your experiences, ideas, or comments on the show, drop a few lines or send a short audio clip to host@biospherepodcast.com. And if you like the show, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. It really means the world to us. This is your host, Sami dos Santos Hult. Thanks for listening to Biosphere One Quest at a Time.